Welcome, everyone. My name is Wayne Eckerson, president of Eckerson Group, and your host today. We designed CDO TechVent to give you all the information you need to buy emerging technologies and implement them effectively. Today, our topic is data governance platforms. To kick off the event, we have a short video for you to watch, so hold on. Wonderful. Now, are you all psyched to learn about data governance platforms? I am. All right, let me dive in and tell you what to expect in the next 2 to 3 hours. So here's our event agenda. We start with a keynote on how to succeed with data governance and pick the right tools, delivered by our data governance experts, Sean Hewitt and Josh Reed, as well as our special guest, Dave Saunders of Kellogg Company. At 12:30, we then start our technology panel, which features representatives from leading data governance solution providers, Atlin, OneTrust, Informatica, and Zaloni. They will discuss how to evaluate and select a data governance platform. I know this is going to be a very lively discussion. At 1:30, we switch to our breakout rooms, where you can talk to our vendor partners about their products or industry trends or anything else that came up in the panel discussion. And you can visit as many as you would like. At 2:15, we'll wrap up. Sean, Josh, and I will summarize key takeaways from the event. By the way, we're recording this event, and we'll send you a link to the video later this week. So if you can't attend the entire thing, you can catch it later. I also should mention that there's a virtual bake-off associated with this event, and that's located on our CDO TechVent website, and you can see a URL for that below. The bake-off enables you to compare 6 data governance products listed here. The vendors have each prepared a short 15-minute video based on criteria that we at Eckerson Group created. And the goal is to make it easy for you to quickly compare products side by side. I've used these videos and I find them a great resource if you're researching data governance products. So we'll keep these online for 6 months. Please use them. I think you'll get a lot of benefit from them. Check them out. I'd like to recognize our partners who helped make this event possible. Our Tier 1 vendor partners are Atlin, Informatica, OneTrust, and Zaloni. Our Tier 2 vendor partners are Atacama, Big ID, and Infovia. Our media partners who helped promote the event are the Bloor Group, Bark, Datanami, Solutions Review, the TDAN newsletter, and TechTarget. Thank you, one and all. Finally, a little bit about us. If you don't know, Eckerson Group is a research, consulting, and advisory firm that specializes in data and analytics. As you can see, our consulting division has worked with many clients, big and small, brand name and not. We have helped them create enterprise data strategies, design modern data architectures, implement and optimize data governance programs, and develop self-service strategies that actually work. Contact us if you'd like more information. Our research division, as you probably know, produces an abundance of reports, articles, and presentations on data and analytics topics, including a companion assessment where you can evaluate your organization's data governance maturity. In fact, we encourage your team to take this assessment annually to chart its progress over time. There's also a companion evaluation sheet on data governance platforms that we encourage you to download. Both of these assets are available via link in the chat window. And also coming is a companion report, a market landscape report that describes and positions data governance products in this space. So that should be out very shortly. A few housekeeping items. To submit questions, use the Q&A window. During the keynote, we'll take questions at the end. during the panel discussion, we'll take them as we go along. So don't hesitate, insert your questions into that Q&A window, and we'll take them as we can. Use the chat window, on the other hand, to find links and content, including the data benchmark assessment I just mentioned, our data governance evaluation spreadsheet I also just mentioned, as well as links to today's 6 breakout rooms, and a link to register for our next CDO TechVent, which is on the topic of data observability, and that event's on August 18th. After the event, we'll send a PDF of this deck and the event recording to all registered attendees. So before we start the keynote, we'd like to run a poll to understand better where you are, the audience, in your data governance journey. So Sarah, can you launch the first poll question? We're going to do 2. So the first question is, what is the status of your data governance program? So select fully deployed, partially deployed, in planning, no plans. I'll give you 5 seconds for this. Shouldn't be too hard. And Sarah, when you think the answers are in, go ahead and display the results. All right, fully deployed looks like 10%, partially deployed 26%, in planning 43%, and no plans 21%. Maybe your consultants or academics. All right, next question. This is the second and final question. Rate the business value of your data governance program, also single choice, high, moderate, low, or non-existent. So we'll give you a second or 2. All right, Sarah, when you're ready. Here we go. High value, 40%. That's great. Moderate, 28%. Low, 12%. Non-existent, 20%. So it sounds like we've got a lot of folks who are still getting their data governance journeys underway, but those who have, a good percentage are delivering some good value. So that's great to see. Okay, now for our keynote presentation. Our speakers today are Sean Hewitt and Josh Reed, Eckerson Group consultants with 30+ years of combined data governance experience. In fact, I consider them the top data governance consultants in our field, and we were lucky to have them as keynoters today. And we have a special guest, that's Dave Saunders, Director of Global Data Analytics and Governance at Kellogg Company. And this is the agenda for the keynote. Sean and Josh will cover data governance success factors. Then they'll turn it over to Dave, who will talk about Kellogg's data governance journey. And finally, I'll finish up talking about data governance products from our research division. So now over to you, Sean.
Thanks, Wayne, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Before we dive into the more advanced aspects of data governance, we just want to make sure that some of the people who are newer to data governance have some basic understanding of what we're talking about. And really, when we say data governance, we're really talking about data risk management. And the risk in the data could come from a variety of places. It could be associated to data quality, data security, data privacy, ambiguity in business terms, or even how that information is being used. Ultimately, it could be anything that's undermining the business outcomes. So in data governance, we aim to create balance between the governance controls and agility and innovation. We just want to use enough governance to mitigate those risks and optimize that value that you're getting with the data. So data management, on the other hand, is about execution. It's really about designing and implementing and maintaining those data processes or solutions to deliver those outcomes. So whether we're looking at data quality, metadata management, reporting and analytics, we're coming up with innovative solutions within the boundaries that we set by data governance. And we need to foster the synergies between the data management teams and governance so they work together. And data governance can also create those synergies or collaboration across the different areas of data management that we see on the left to get everybody working towards the same goals, same priorities, and really delivering optimal value for the entire organization. So if we go to the next slide, the process of data governance at a high level is really simplistic. And this could be applied whether you are looking at a project-based initiative, embedding data governance into the creation of a new predictive model, or you are implementing data governance for a specific data domain like human resources data, or you are on the path of creating enterprise-wide data governance. We need to start by building some intelligence. And to do that, we need to start by identifying what data we have and gathering as much information as we can about it. We need to know, what is the security classification of that information? What is the retention requirements for that information? What other metadata can we collect to help support data discovery, data literacy, and just the use of that information to support the business? We also need to understand what risks are associated to that data. Are there any regulatory requirements that we need to be aware of? So all of that is part of building intelligence around that data asset. So that's what we mean by identify. Next, we move to the second step, where we're assigning responsibility for that data asset or that domain of data assets to a steward or an owner. And we need to be very clear on what we are making them accountable for and what decision rights do they have. So what authority? Do they have authority to set the quality levels? Do they have authority to define the access rules for that information? So we need to be crystal clear in that, because confusion is the enemy of data governance. It creates a lot of problems, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. Third step is we need to come up with a plan. And this is not a plan in terms of designing the optimal solution. This is a governance plan. So what do we need to do? What steps are we going to take in order to create that balance between governance, control, and agility and innovation? So what policy changes do we need? What stewardship responsibilities need to be implemented? So if we are implementing a new MDM process and we have some harmonization activities where there's exceptions, and we need somebody, a steward, to look at that and go through and validate, our fuzzy matches or anything like that. So designing those supporting processes to really support the outcomes. So once we've done that, we need to make sure everybody is set up properly to fulfill their roles as dictated in that plan from step 3. So we need to educate. And it's not just enough to educate them when we're implementing those new solutions or onboarding them for that data domain. We need to continue to support them and provide them with coaching and get them in a position where they can be successful in those roles and confident that they can do that. And then also making sure we put steps in place to manage turnover. So if somebody leaves, we're not left with that stewardship responsibility being unmanaged. And then lastly, we need, like any process, we need to monitor it and improve. So we need a handful of solid metrics that we're looking at on a regular basis to confirm we are achieving our goals. And we'll talk to this more later, but demonstrating the value and marketing the value is critical in this type of initiative. So we need to be able to capture those metrics to provide that defendable value. And then we need to understand if we're appropriately balancing those controls between data governance and agility and innovation. Maybe we went a little heavy and we need to throttle back a little bit on the standards or policies because it's slowing us down and we're really not getting the value we thought out of it. So it's that constant realignment to make sure we're optimizing those processes. And then identifying where you need to improve from a administrative perspective. So are we making decisions quick enough? Do we have the right level of engagement from our data council? All of those things need to be baked into the data governance framework in order for it to really perform optimally. Okay, if we go to the next slide, and this just shows you everything together. Now, although at the high level, the process seems very simplistic, in theory, it should be easy to execute that process. We find a lot of organizations really struggle to get traction with data governance. And even if they have executives who really understand the value of data governance and are very supportive of the program, quite often they still struggle to get the results that they want. And a lot of it has to do with these aspects here we have on the screen. So these execution components. So this is how we get things done. This is the machine of data governance. And a lot of organizations don't spend enough time clarifying exactly how we are going to execute things within the data governance program. How are we going to make decisions? Something that simple can be so confusing and so frustrating, especially for executives. We pull them into a data council meeting, and then we haven't really sorted out how we are going to operate. And then they get frustrated. And with frustration, you lose confidence in the program. And a lot of programs struggle from that perspective. So for execution components, all the way from the strategy, all the way down to those operating procedures, we need them well defined. We don't need to go overboard. We just need to define exactly what we need to make things operate based on the scale and scope of our program. And Josh is going to expand on all of these in the next few slides. So second, we have our program approach. We can't manage this as a project. There's no end date to this. Ultimately, we're starting off. We need to identify some quick wins, identify how can we mitigate those risks as quickly as possible using the resources we have. And that is a concept we call MVG, or minimal valuable governance. It might not be pretty, it might not be efficient, but at least you're doing what you need to mitigate those risks. You don't have a data breach, or you're managing quality as best you can based on the capabilities you have. And next, for me, this is one of the most important parts altogether. And I think this is why a lot of organizations struggle. They don't accept that data governance is a cultural transformation. And because of that, we need to be very adept at change management. And we need to understand the culture of our organization. We need to understand the mindsets of the individuals. We need to understand the history. We need to understand the traditions. And most especially, we need to understand the power relationships. So these are different than the reporting relationships. There's people who have more power than others, even in the same position. We need to understand those so we can either use those to help us or mitigate some of the roadblocks that may come with those power relationships. And as I said, Josh will go a little more into some of those details in a few slides. Lastly, as I mentioned before, we need intelligence. Metadata is the fuel of data governance. So we need to build that data intelligence, start gathering the information. If you're starting with a project, you contain the scope of your data intelligence to mapping out the data that's coming into that project and managing the risk and optimizing the value of that by implementing stewards and standards and things like that. But if you don't have that metadata available, you're flying blind. And to sustain metadata is very difficult. So we've had lots of projects where we've built a data catalog in a SharePoint list or an Excel spreadsheet, and it becomes obsolete as soon as you're done. And there's more and more data, more and more metadata. So it's very difficult to tackle all of that in a way that's sustainable. And that's where we want to look at some tools to help in a few minutes. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Josh now, and he's going to expand on some of those concepts for you.
Thanks very much, Sean, and thanks everybody for joining today's call. We wanted to get into a little bit more detail on each of the items that Sean talked about just now. So everyone on today's call has something to take away to their teams immediately, whether you be starting something up new in the planning phase or hoping to mature your data governance practice. We hope to leave you with tools that help immediately. I'm going to start off with what I call execution components. These really are the collection of things that we need to set your data governance implementation up for success. We start with vision, mission, and goals. These are the things that brings everyone together and creates that common understanding and drives everyone in the same direction. Together with a strategy and roadmap, the leadership team and the people doing the work have a clear understanding of what's going to be done, when we need to do it, and what success is going to look like. Very often, the strategy and roadmap flesh out the need for policies. New policies or changes to existing policies need standards to support them. Standards often create conversations around organization. Well, if we all agree that the policy and standards are the right way to manage our data, do we need more people to do it right? We have the charter, not only for data governance, but for the oversight bodies that ensure that we are adhering to the standards, policy, and communicating across teams. Of course, there will be programs to make change. Very possibly, very likely, there are platforms that are impacted or need to be updated. And most importantly, we need to make sure we're transparent on metrics so we can hold ourselves accountable to how well we're doing and how well we're staying on track. Next slide. The program approach really is the foundation of how we organize ourselves to achieve our proven data governance capability. And it all starts with that executive support. So if we don't have our execution components together, we should just pause and get ourselves organized before we start to go. For us, we believe that starting off with an objective of minimum valuable governance is the way to go. So where are the quick wins? Who are the early adopters? Where are the big problems that we can easily solve because we've got the tools in place, the people in place, and the desire to make the change? As minimum valuable governance starts to work, we should be able to show through test and learn actual results that benefit the organization. That creates an organic growth, and we start to build that muscle memory where we can build the capacity broader across the organization. We start to get ourselves into a point where we're all starting to move together, and we implement governance by design, where data governance is implemented in not only project delivery, but business as usual activities. As this continues to grow and proliferate through the organization, your data literacy grows. The seat of pants measure of, holy cow, data governance really started to make things easy for me. And those measurable results are not only seen in reports, but people start talking about it. And that's when you get to a point where you have proven value of data governance organization. As Sean mentioned, change management really is a big part to getting data governance right, because this is a culture change. I've broken down the types of change management into 3 types. So we've got systemic, tactical, and organizational. Systemic really talks about that top-down leadership support, where we get the leaders aligned to what we want to do, why we want to do it, how we're going to do it, and they support us along the way. What sometimes surprises people is how many people at the leadership level need to be involved. It goes beyond IT. We can't forget about project management office, and of course, legal, regulatory, and compliance. As Sean had mentioned earlier, it's important to understand what the requirements are of the organization and how data governance can help with them. Once we have the top down, getting that tactical change going, building that momentum is that bottom-up growth for data governance components. Here we have the people on the floor doing the work as business analysts, product owners, data stewards, data owners, and they are the ones working to embed data governance into everyday work. Organizationally, this is where you really start to feel it come together, where you have that middle out peer support enablement, where different data stewards across different lines of business are talking to each other, helping each other, having lunch and learns, having events, and even going out for coffee and sharing tips and tricks on what works and what doesn't work. This really shows that everyone in an organization has a role in data governance. Even if you don't realize you're talking about data governance, when you get to a certain level of maturity, especially with the middle out support, this is what really helps bring everybody together. Soft skills are the key to success in data governance, and I think that surprises a lot of organizations. There is an impression that because we're talking about data and governance, we need people with a really technical skill set. I'm not going to play down the technical skill set. We definitely need somebody who knows how to talk the talk and walk the walk in the space of data. But being able to build momentum, being able to influence and really think outside of the box and be that brave change agent is really key to standing up a data governance organization. You can pair that domain experience that you might have in the organization with somebody who has the ability to train and coach. Get those kinds of skill sets working together so you can drive better, clear, consistent communications instead of trying to put all that work on one person. One of the important things about communications is communicate and over communicate. Lots of marketing, lots of selling, show people the positive results, and gamify where you can. I've seen things like having a data month where we have a data education month where we talk about, if you go to this website, maybe it's your data governance portal, learn a little bit more about data governance, answer a questionnaire, and be eligible to win a prize. Being able to handle change is really key. Very often there's organizational change management folks within the organization that can help with the top level communications, provide expert advice, and help you with process engineering and re-engineering where it's needed. Sean and I both agree that the starting point for a data governance program is with metadata. And this really helps to build your data intelligence. Now, where you start might be different than somebody else within your industry or even across North America. A lot of folks start with a conceptual model and a business taxonomy to start to create that common language and start to design the target state. Some people's problems would be more tied to having an inventory and the catalog of catalogs, so analysts and people in projects can find the data they need quickly. Other folks want to start with data lineage and enterprise architecture so they can understand their current state, so they can start to build a target state. And the ones that I think Sean and I cling to the most very often is just the operational metadata and data governance components. All of the things that we document for data governance is metadata, and that's part of the story. And all of these things are critical to any data governance program. That's it for me. Over to you, Sean.
Thanks, Josh. So then just to recap some of the concepts we talked about here. So what we're really trying to do is get everybody aligned, take aim, and then execute. So whether you are starting with a small scale project, focusing on a specific business function and the domains, data domains with that function, or you are embarking on full enterprise data governance, you really need to take that align, aim, execute approach. So you start with the strong foundation, you get your executive sponsor and executive stakeholders aligned, make sure they understand where we're going and how we're going to get there, and when we're going to be engaging in all of them. And that is the first step, really, of the change strategy, is making sure everybody is aligned, they understand what the goal is, why we're doing this, how we're going to do it, and what their role is. And then we're identifying what the minimal viable governance is, and then working towards that. So that's that first baby step, is identifying some existing issue or risk that we need to address, and we're applying governance rigor to that, embedding that with the change management strategy to get the organization to understand that the importance of data and the importance of governing it. We're not trying to create more work for them. We're actually trying to streamline things and eventually create, it will result in less work for them if we've done it right. And then, of course, we need to start the execution by collecting that intelligence through the metadata, and hopefully you have the tools to start that. So a lot of you might be starting new programs, and in those cases, these lessons can still apply. You just start very small and you will learn as you are gathering that intelligence. That will guide you in terms of what policies and standards you need. But initially, you could start with one overarching data strategy that covers a lot of those areas of data management, provide some guiding principles and basic requirements as a starting point. And then that will help you move in the right direction and demonstrate some immediate value. So we're going to hand it over to Dave Saunders from Kellogg's, and he's going to share some information about the journey that they've had, both with their program and the tools.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And thanks, Wayne and team, for the opportunity to be part of this event today. It's very exciting. Look forward to the conversation. And just want to say I've had the pleasure of working with Josh and Sean over the past few months, and I think you'll see a lot of parallels in what I'm presenting with what they've talked about. So I just want to kind of set the stage a little bit with where we've been and where we're headed along our data governance journey, and some of the tools that we've used to enable that journey. So probably, almost 10 years ago, we implemented a PIM system, or product information management tool, to help manage our product data. And we used that to make sure that we could distribute that data to our websites in the form of nutritional information, as well as out to our customers, that being retailers and food service organizations, in the form of logistical, weights and measures. How big is a pallet? How big is a case? How big is a package that's going to sit on the shelf, et cetera. So that was sort of the step one in our journey. And as we did that, we quickly realized that we needed to expand into other domains. So we added that to our master data management approach in customer, finance, other domains. And it was around that time that we implemented a data quality management tool to make sure that the data that we were using both internally and shipping externally was of the highest quality. More recently, like many of you probably have been doing, we've focused on privacy and consumer data. And we're in the process of implementing a global privacy and compliance tool to help us with that initiative. And at the same time, kind of in parallel, we are implementing a new modernized data and analytics platform. And we know that we need to implement some good governance to ensure that we get the best return on that investment. And part of that solution is a data catalog component. So we're really leveraging the data and analytics project to gather and gain some enthusiasm and excitement around our data governance journey. So if we flip to the next slide, I'd like to chat a little bit about what we're doing with this analytics platform and give you a sense for how we're applying governance in that area. So our goal is to move this out of our data center fully and get everything fully cloud enabled, scalable platform for global analytics at Kellogg's. And per the comments that Josh and Sean talked about, we're starting with metadata, right? We need to implement a data catalog solution to help reduce the time and effort it takes to find the data that's in our platform, right? We also know that we need to enhance the availability and connectivity of the data by implementing a more strategic data architecture approach. We need to reduce data duplication and help with speed to market by expanding our data engineering COE. We can always improve ways of working around our solution delivery process, and kind of overarching over all of this is really just having good governance practices in place to make sure that we can build trust in data and get everyone really participating in the process. So one of the ways that, if you look at the next slide, the way that we're trying to do this, I know Sean and Josh have called it minimum valuable governance. We call this minimum viable governance. As we roll out our platform and get kind of open up the doors to the new data and analytics platform, we don't want to throw too much at people at the same time. So we're trying to apply some good change management approaches here and take this more evolutionary approach. And in the crawl phase, what we're trying to do is get those roles adopted. So our data governance roles, data stewards, data owners, data sponsors, we really need to make sure that those people around the organizations really embrace that accountability. We need them to help us do the data classification and mapping to make sure that it aligns with our domain model and our sensitivity classification. And we want them to start doing some data curation in our catalog solution. So that's kind of the initial test and learn phase. And as we move into more of up the maturity scale, we want to evolve and expand the scope to include data and analytics councils. We want to make sure our data owners and data stewards are reviewing and approving or not the access requests that people have to their data sets. And we want to expand the scope of data lineage that we're tracking within our data catalog and beyond. And then as we morph into more of a run state, into a kind of a repeat test, not test and learn, but a kind of continuous optimization approach, we want to make sure that we're covering the data quality for all those analytical data sets. And we want to make sure that we're aligning with our corporate data retention policies. So that's how we're looking at describing this to our data stewards around the organization. And if we look at the next slide, as I think Josh mentioned, I never thought I would hear the term gamifying data governance, but here it is. We want to have sort of a contest to get those data stewards engaged and kind of, do a time boxed period where we see who can curate the most dashboards, who can curate their dashboard first, and win some achievers points, which is our, one of our recognition programs that kind of you can turn points into, say, Amazon gift cards, for instance. So what we hope to achieve by this is really getting those data stewards to embrace their roles and realize the importance of data governance. I think many of them are already doing this and they don't really realize that there's a name for what they're doing. And we want them to begin using the data catalog solution and doing that curation of those dashboards and data sets. And honestly, everyone we have shown the catalog to is very excited and wants to immediately get in and start using it. They can already see the benefits, but we want them to do that, and then also share those benefits out with the rest of the organization to highlight and hopefully accelerate the adoption there. And we just want to have some fun and have some healthy competition. The regions are always looking for ways to compete against each other and show somebody that they're better than the others, and just reward them with some incentives in the form of those achievers points. So that's kind of the initial state. We're going to probably implement this contest late this quarter, early next quarter, as we open up the doors to the new platform. So if we jump to the next slide, I think what we're trying to arrive at is the nirvana state here of governance. And we envision that what we'll have at that point is that all of our data stewards are aligned to their roles and actively engaged with the practices of governance. We've got data quality being understood and monitored for those critical data sources. We're curing and classifying our data sets according to their sensitivity, and then the access to them is being controlled by our data owners. And data sources and dashboards are all being curated in the catalog solution so people can find them when they go to look for something in the catalog. So ultimately, we want people to think that governance is not just an IT problem or an IT responsibility. We want it to be broadly embraced by everyone and see it as the entire organization's responsibility. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Sean, and thank you for the opportunity to present kind of what we're doing at Kellogg. So that's just a brief overview of where we're at. So Sean, back to you.
Thanks, Dave. We really appreciate you sharing those tidbits with us. So next, we're going to move into talking about the data governance platforms. And we've spent quite a bit of time over the last year at Eckerson discussing data governance platforms and how they've been evolving and coming up with what we think is required, really necessary to support a healthy data governance program. So if we go to the next slide, so this is the framework we came up with. And over years of working within data governance, both Josh and I have had to work with whatever tools we had at hand, and have both, been dreaming up these, this type of platform that would be really helpful for us. So, to manage the workflows and facilitate search across all data assets, and to provide, a portal that people can go to as a single source of data governance information and look up information on their data council, or what does it mean to be a data steward, or what training's available for me, things like that. That's where that portal comes in handy. And then having that search capability across all of the different components. So your data catalog, business glossary, but also your policy and compliance information. So if you have an inventory of your policies and standards and guidelines, that search returns that information, and you get a full picture of that data intelligence. And that's really what it's about, is giving people access to that data intelligence so they can perform their role within data governance. And so the blue box at the top, that's really what we see as the core functional components of the data governance platform. Now, at the bottom, you see the orange and the green. That's where we're dividing kind of data governance from data management. And I'm sure all of you have seen platforms where master data management or data quality is embedded with data governance, and they're blended together. And that's just the way things have evolved over time. But from a conceptual perspective, this is how we see it. There needs to be a lot of synergies between these platforms. So, you have your data security platforms and your integration platforms feeding metadata back into the governance to support that intelligence gathering. But then we're feeding information from the governance platforms back into the metadata functions. And these metadata functions can be just modules within a greater platform. It's just we've separated them this way so we can talk to them a little bit differently. So we're sending, it could be metadata down to these platforms to help the operations. So if you're doing dynamic obfuscation of data using metadata, we can be passing that metadata and the access rules to that platform. If you need additional context for your data privacy tools, we can pass that from the data governance down. So who is the steward for a specific data asset? We don't want to be maintaining that metadata in multiple places. So if we can synchronize it across these platforms, it's more efficient, easier to sustain that metadata. Then at the sides, you can see that we anticipate the need to plug third parties into all of these platforms to create those synergies across and pass information to those applications so they can perform their functions in data management, whether it's protecting information or making it easily accessible to other people. So if we go to the next slide, I think, Wayne, this goes back to you.
Right. So at Eckerson Group, we've created some evaluation criteria to help you select data governance products and platforms. This is a spreadsheet that you can download from the chat window. Takes you to our website where you can download the actual spreadsheet, which is yours to kind of manipulate and tailor to your own organization, your own requirements. What we've done is set it up with 15 criteria and then sub-criteria or capabilities, which you can add, delete as you want. And then you can take 3, 4 products and then evaluate them side by side against these requirements. And you can also apply weighting. So the first 11 criteria listed here are taken directly from that framework that Sean just discussed on the prior screen. So, and then we added 4 more criteria in bold at the bottom: time to value, integration, vendor viability, and pricing. So the 15 together we think are criteria that you should use when evaluating data governance platforms in particular. Some of these platforms might be just focused on data catalogs or other aspects of data governance. Some might combine data governance with data management as well, and analytics. Now, moving beyond that, we created this data governance product framework. It's a quadrant chart to help you categorize the products when making a short list of products to compare. It's a very confusing market out there right now, and things are changing very fast. So we want to come in at this at a pretty high level so it wouldn't get outdated too quickly. So the y-axis represents functionality. The left side of that axis is divided between data management-centric products and data governance-centric products. And the right side of the y-axis consists of cloud data-centric products and analytics-centric products, and we'll show you those in a second. The x-axis represents scope. On the left are pure play data governance or data management products, products that just do data governance or data management or some combination of the two. On the right side are not pure plays, right? These we call, software suites that are focused on some other aspect, but do incorporate data governance or data management to some degree. So we'll position the products in each of these quadrants. And again, the purpose here is not to identify the best product for you. That's really hard to do until you understand your requirements and then map those to what's out there in the marketplace. Rather, our goal here is to help you create a short list of products, guide you in your search and find the products that are best suited to evaluate in a formal process. So we'll position products in each quadrant. In this upper left quadrant, you want to choose products if you already have data management tools and need data governance to supplement those. You want to choose products in this quadrant if you need a data management platform with integrated data governance capabilities. So the whole kit and caboodle. You choose products up here if you need an analytics product that also offers data governance to manage the output of those analytical tools, which can get overwhelming in many cases. And then down here, most of us have some large platform suite, typically in the cloud now, but you often want these cloud/database vendors to offer some form of data governance, and they may end up being your data governance tools and data management tools, but oftentimes they're not the core focus of the vendor. So these are the 4 quadrants, and now I'll just show you how we position products in these. So, these are data governance pure play products in our estimation, although things are changing pretty quickly because some are now adding data management capabilities. And these are data management pure play products with integrated data governance capabilities. And data management vendors have been very quickly adopting data governance capabilities to augment and supplement their platforms. These are analytics vendors with data governance and data management capabilities built in. And then finally, these are the big players, the large software companies with data management, data governance capabilities, either as built into their core platforms or as services that you can buy separately. So that's our product positioning framework. We'd love to talk with you more about this. We spent a lot of time talking to most of the pure play products on the left and some on the right as well. And this report that I mentioned earlier that's coming out very shortly, it contains these frameworks as well as descriptions of each of these products and how they differentiate from each other. So the summary for the product section of this keynote is, yes, data governance products are proliferating, which is a great news because as Sean mentioned, he's been doing data governance with Excel and SharePoint, and it's very limiting, right? You just can't keep up with the amount of metadata and tasks that are required. And also these products are converging, especially data management, data governance are coming into one. Data governance platforms, as we designed here, offer you all you need data management and data governance functionality. And what you need to do is come up with a short list, then evaluate those products in your short list according to requirements that you defined, and then select one and go with it. And then apply all the success factors that Josh and Sean and Dave so brilliantly covered earlier in this keynote. So that is the conclusion of our keynote. And we've got about 10 minutes for Q&A. And I thought I might kick this off with a question to all three of you guys, which is, what are the biggest pitfalls that you've seen that companies fall into when trying to implement a data governance program? And by the way, as you guys key up your responses, you in the audience, please insert your questions into the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring that now, and we'll turn to your questions in a second. So who wants to tackle that question about pitfalls?
Yeah, I can take that one on. Usually the biggest pitfalls that I've come across are mostly related to communication and change management. So quite often you get a group of very data savvy individuals. They understand the data, they understand the processes, they have it in mind as to what they want to achieve from a governance perspective, but then they don't often have the rigor for consistent and constant communication, and then those soft skills that really are required to implement change. So, and it comes back to having a clear vision of where you want to go as well. So in order to start communicating, you need that clear understanding where you want to go. How does this fit into a bigger picture? So if you're starting off with a project-based governance initiative, you still need to understand what the bigger picture is, so you're working towards that picture. And one of the challenges within those project-based initiatives for data governance is you still need broader executive alignment when it comes to things like standardizing business terms. You can't do that within the project. You need to engage a broader group of stakeholders and decision makers to make sure that you're landing on the right definition of key terms like customer or member or product. If you don't do that properly, you will have problems down the road when other projects are trying to do the same thing and they don't agree to what you're doing.
Josh, Dave, any other thoughts on pitfalls?
Yeah, I really stick to making sure everybody's moving in the same direction. And as Sean has spoken already, uses words the same way. Words can be a really powerful thing when everybody's talking about the same thing, but when we use words differently, it really can slow things down.
So you guys mentioned there's three. Oh, go ahead, Dave. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I totally agree with everything that Sean and Josh have said. And I would say the data stewards and the ownership outside of IT is so important. And I think that we've got to show those data stewards sort of what's in it for me, right? Why am I incented to do this? The value and the honestly, the risk. You need to create some fear in their minds as well to get them to sometimes adopt those roles. So yeah, definitely agree with everything you guys said.
Some fear. You're going to have to elaborate on that. And this is a good segue to one of our attendee questions, which was any recommendations to identify a good data steward or definition on roles required to get a data governance initiative started. Like, how do you identify who's a good data steward? And then I guess breathe the fear of God in them. Is that?
I go for the people that are already that data geek and really almost emotional and excited about owning that data and already have that sense of, raising their hand, there's a problem with data quality, or I'd like to make my report better. Those are the people that I would personally start with as an early adopter. If you're just starting out, I wouldn't go big, let's onboard everybody at the same time. I would really go with that crawl, walk, and run approach and start with the folks that really want to see the change and help them make part of the change and give them kudos along the way.
Yeah, and it also depends on how you're defining data steward, because some organizations, because of the culture, The steward is actually the executive who's making the decision because they don't have data owners. So really it comes down to defining what responsibilities does that individual need to have. Are we having them monitor data quality? Are we having them take care of an MDM process to harmonize information or to validate the harmonization of information? And then, as Josh said, look for people who are kind of doing that already now, provide them with the support and tools and training to do it even better. And you find that they're so happy to be recognized for what they're doing, and then they're getting support that they've never had before.
So just to follow up, one attendee mentioned, do you steal data stewards from lines of business or IT teams? What are you actually looking for?
Great question. Josh, you want to?
I wouldn't say steal, but maybe a little bit. I believe that there's a mix of data stewards, again, to what Sean was talking about. It depends what you mean by data steward. By my definition, I think they belong in the business, people who have that sense of ownership, and they are the custodian, so to speak, for the data, not necessarily the technology, but the data that's in the technology.
But then they definitely need some support from the technical teams.
You can't do it alone.
Yeah.
That's what we identified, both business data stewards and technical SMEs for each kind of the domain and data set as we made sort of our list of those data stewards. But I do think that, per what you guys said, they have to be knowledgeable about the data, number one. They have to be passionate about it. That's a great asset to have. And they have to be in the weeds enough to know and be able to look at the data and speak and, solve problems, speak intelligently about it and solve problems with it as needed. So that's what I see as a good.
Right. And this is where that change management muscle building comes in handy, because quite often you need the help of individuals who don't have the mindset to actually jump in and help you. And you need to transform those individuals into the stewards you need. So having access to people who are very proficient at change management really helps by identifying what motivates those individuals. How can you turn them around to get them to be your biggest champions? And I've seen that happen where the biggest objectors turn around to the biggest champions when you show them that you are going to make them look like superstars. And it's so exciting when you see that happen, but it really takes some change management skill to pull that off.
Slightly different topic here. MVG. All right. So Sean and Josh, you talk about minimum valuable governance. And Dave, you talk about minimum viable governance. And this is obviously a play on software development too. Can you guys explain what this means again, and then why you have slightly different terms for that MVG acronym?
Sure. I'll start. We took it from the perspective of, we knew when we turned on this new analytics platform, we had to have just sort of some minimum things in place. Otherwise, we were just going to end up with the Wild West again. And so we wanted to make sure that we had those just critical building blocks ready to go. And so that's why we called it minimum viable governance. It's like just a minimum viable product. We're kind of playing off that term. So, and I'll let Josh and Sean talk about their perspective.
So when Sean and I talked about this, we knew one of our key principles was crawl, walk, and run. But through our experience, we know that we really need to focus on the things that add value to the business. It's really important not to take an academic approach to data governance, maybe from a book or something that's been published, that doesn't necessarily add value, that doesn't resonate with the people around you and the leadership team. Focus on the things that add value to the organization, use the tools that are available in different data capabilities, but don't try to do it all. Do the stuff that shows value quickly to help build your momentum and really how to build your community of practice.
As Dave's slide showed, that the MVG is not the end goal. Ultimately, the end goal is that optimal sustainable governance, where you're squeezing the maximum value out of that effort and doing it as efficiently as possible, and that you have a sustainable approach where if somebody leaves, the program's not falling apart. That's the end state, or the goal that we want to see.
Great questions coming in, too many for us to actually address today, which makes me think we should probably schedule an open house webinar where you three get together and just field questions from folks about how to do data governance the right way. If you can give me like a 10-second response, I'll ask you one more quick question, which is, some people are asking about, well, how do we govern new forms of data like unstructured data and real-time data? Do you have any quick retorts to that?
Yeah, I would say it's about the risk. Understand the risk to the data and govern it appropriately.
Yeah, it comes back to that governance plan. So, you do an assessment of what is the risk and what is the lightest amount of governance necessary to manage that risk.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much, Josh, Sean, and Dave. That was wonderful. I wish we had more time. We will get to all these questions if you've submitted one, even at the end of the wrap-up session. We can tackle some of those then as well. At this time, we'd like to pivot to our panel discussion of vendor providers to talk about the technology, how it's evolving, and how you might select one for your own organization if you haven't already. But before that, we'd like to do another poll question. So Sarah, if you could display the first poll, which is, what types of data governance products do you have? Check all that apply. Do you have data governance portal, a data catalog, business glossary, policy catalog, workflow management for data governance? So select all of those that you have right now, and then we'll see where we're at from a technology perspective. And Sarah, you can display the results when you see most people have submitted answers. Okay, results. 43% have a data governance portal. That's great. 64% have a data catalog, even better. 61% have a business glossary. Those two are going hand in hand these days. 30% have a policy catalog, and 45% have a workflow management tool. Terrific. All right, let's do the second and last question. Which data management tasks do you formally govern as part of your data governance program? So again, check all that apply. Do you formally manage or govern data quality, your data access controls, data privacy, data security, master data, data architecture, your data models, your reports and dashboards, your ML AI models, content like documents, and things like that. We could have gone on here, but I think this is probably enough as it is. So select the ones that you are actually formally governing today, and we'll see what we've got. All right, the results are coming in. It's like 4 are kind of tied for first. Data quality, 57%, data access, 57%, data privacy and data security, 60% each. And trailing by a little bit, it's master data at 34, data architecture at 45, data models at 40%, reports and dashboards at 43%. Surprised that's not actually a little higher. Great. All right, so that should provide some good context for our panel discussion. So why don't we introduce our panelists? And here they are. I've been looking forward to this session for quite a while. As I said earlier, we have representatives from 4 leading data governance vendors who are going to discuss how to evaluate and select a data governance platform. I've asked them all to engage in a spirited but friendly discussion. This will be fun. So with us today, we have Gaurav Pathak, VP of Product Management at Informatica, Prukapa Sankar, co-founder of Atland, Ashwin Nayak, VP of Engineering at Zaloni, and Matt Helmrath, Data Governance Consultant for OneTrust. So welcome, everyone. Now, for you in the audience, I'm sure this discussion will generate a lot of questions. Again, please use the Q&A button below to ask a question of any or all panelists, and we'll respond to those questions in real time as we go along. So make sure we got everybody here at this point. See my video? Yeah, I see Gaurav, I see Prukapa, Ashwin, and Matt. All right, looks like we're all here, and I've asked our keynoters to stick around as well and provide commentary and ask questions as we go along. So this is kind of a freewheeling discussion, so I'm just going to ask the first question, which is the basic question we came here to talk about, which, what things should customers consider when selecting a data governance platform? So who wants to start out today?
I can take that, Ben.
Sure.
Can you hear me? So first of all, thank you. This is really great start. great event so far, and thanks for having us. So what we are seeing here is the consideration for a data governance is, where do you want to start with? So we talked about minimum viable governance, MVG, and really defining those working metrics. What is the most important thing for your business? And that's just one point, and starting from there and then kind of iterating on top of that. The second one would be sort of defining your landscape of the data. Where are the different data systems, databases, files available, and where it is available in terms of cloud, your on-premise database. And in adding those two, along with the criteria the 15 criteria you talked about, I think that would be a great start to start the governance evaluation platform.
Great, thank you.
And I could expand on that when I love the framework you guys had. I think identifying the key use cases that the organization needs to go for, any data governance platform should have all the base capabilities for that: data risk management, data intelligence, trust, data profiling, data lineage, search, discovery, collaboration, workflows, business glossary. We think of all of them as base capabilities now that will help with the data governance program. But beyond that, I think three major things that users should look for are: number one, automation. You talked about starting with metadata. We definitely want to make sure that the tool and the governance platform is able to capture and extract metadata from all the different data sources, BI tools, etc. That's important to the organization. Automation is all about making sure that you don't go back to the dark days of Excel when you're adding data lineage information, all of that by hand, and trying to get information show up on the screen. You just replacing one tool with another that way. But it's also beyond, automation goes beyond lineage and metadata. It's about stewardship activities, classifications, glossary associations, things that are most tedious when you're doing these governance activities. The world is changing. We are seeing a lot of AI-assisted, AI-led, AI-managed capabilities coming to the market, and data governance is one area where automation can help. The second is coverage of the entire data estate itself. Most organizations today are multi-cloud, hybrid. Being able to access and being able to control and govern all of these different data ecosystems is going to be very, very important. And then here again, I would ask the users to look not only at the present, but also the future, where the organization's going to. Most of the users I talk with, more than 90% of them are multi-cloud today or will become multi-cloud in the future. And the third, that's also how the metadata management, data governance market is evolving, is the integration with data management and consumption. I don't know of users in this organization, in this webinar, but have you ever been asked on a Friday, get this report, I want how many customer churn for us for this particular product? Great question. I wish there was like a table where I could do a select star from and then get all of this information for you right away. Of course, we don't have that table, and we call it data intelligences and data governance's last mile problem. We have a lot of this information sitting in the catalog where you can search for this information, get where the data sources are, but they are not there where data consumption is taking place, where data delivery is working as well. So bringing that intelligence to where users are working to provide in-context data intelligence will become very important. So again, automation, coverage of the data estate, and integration with data management consumption, those three are very important while looking for new data governance platforms.
Yeah, those are great points. And I want to come back to the automation in a second, but I want to give other panelists a chance to express what they think is most important to look for in a data governance product first.
I can go, and I'll take a slightly different take on it, right? I think before you look at a data governance platform, it's first really important to understand how data governance is changing as an ecosystem, right? 10 years ago, a lot of data governance started out as top-down, risk-based, compliance-based inside their organizations. But today, the world itself is changing, right? Like the broad adoption of cloud. Look at the number of organizations that used any kind of data pre-Snowflake, Databricks, and cloud, and the number of teams. I think Snowflake itself has 6,000 teams that are using it today, right? And so there's been a huge proliferation in the kind of data teams that are even using data platforms in the first place. Now, this new era of data governance is actually not about the same ideals that happened before. Netflix actually has a wonderful internal motto for their data governance team. They say context, not control. And so if you think about that and just like process that in some ways, right? I think about data governance as enablement. In some ways, like your true vision of data governance is actually when you're able to enable the rest of the organization to be more productive. Every data team, every analyst, every engineer is more productive, and every business user is able to make data-driven decisions that they can trust. And so I think when you think about that world, what that means for data governance platforms also changes, right? When you think about it from an enablement perspective, everything changes. And so two core things that I'd encourage to think about. First is, Gaurav touched a little bit on this, but I want to take it one step further, is just what does programmatic governance really mean, right? In the data mesh world, there is a lot that you can do, which is not just about AI/ML. I think, in fact, we've been talking about augmentation and AI/ML for the last now 2 to 3 years in the ecosystem, right? But technically, if you think about what metadata can really do, you can say, hey, based on the usage of my data products and usage metadata, I create an automatic programmatic workflow where I purge data assets on the basis of that, right? And I send out a message to the data product owner saying, this particular data product of yours is being used really well, you can gamify it a little bit as well, right? And so I think one element is like, what does it really mean to create automated workflows where metadata can be used to like really activate a lot of this? And the second, I think the most important, is human workflows. Gone are the days where, traditionally in this ecosystem, we would bring it into like one tool. But when I'm in a dashboard and I'm like, can I trust this dashboard? As a user, I don't want to go jump into a different tool, search for the dashboard, see if I can trust it. I want context where I am, where I need it. And so one thing that we think a lot about is how do you actually activate data intelligence, metadata, governance, whatever you decide to call it, right? How do you activate that and bring that back into the day-to-day workflows that people are using every day? People are using Slack, people are using Jira, people are using like the day-to-day workflows that people are using. How do you bring that back into the day-to-day workflows? Governance should not feel like governance. Governance should feel like work. It should just be a part of day-to-day work.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Instead of just collecting metadata for the sake of collecting it and maybe reading it, you want to activate that metadata and, as you say, make it programmatic by using it to spawn alerts or trigger workflows and things like that, as well as embed that metadata in the tools that people are using so they can see firsthand by clicking, maybe right-clicking on something, so they can see, what the source of this metric is. Is that accurate? Okay. Activating metadata. I like that. Excellent.
Yeah, I'll round it out. So, kind of taking bits and pieces of what everyone has said so far, we would tend to agree. I think that the way I hear a lot of the customers that I support talking about data and this new wave of data intelligence is that trust has to be at the center of how data is aggregated, accumulated, and then ultimately utilized and disposed of, right? How do we prevent, misuse of data? How do you enable the right look and feel for what data is actively being, facilitated and matriculated out through the organization based on how it was collected? What was the context associated with that data at point of collection? How is it being utilized by others across our business? And how do we effectively start to really deduplicate the cross-team efforts of privacy, security, risk, and enablement functions in the business and give a single platform that can socialize the level of responsibility through all the different data-driven policies, the different SLAs that we maintain as a part of our organizational stance, and effectively be able to run out what that data is going to be used for and be able to effectively aggregate and account for the acquisition framework utilized to collect that information, the minimization framework associated with it, and then ultimately the disposition of that data effectively so that we can maintain a level of trust and loyalty with the individuals that we support, whether that be other businesses or consumers directly.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So now you've met everyone, you know where they're from. They all have their branding on the background too, so that helps as well. So I want to go back to comments that each of you made, and we'll also take questions from the audience as well. On this automation, I want to first ask Sean and Josh about this, because it seems to me you guys have been doing data governance, since the primitive days, right? Where you had very basic tools to do this. And I think, as you said in your keynote, it's just proved impossible. So would you agree that automation is absolutely essential, and that these tools that are embedding automation through ML, AI, or whatever means, workflows, triggers, is key to a successful data governance program?
I almost react emotionally and say data governance can be a burden without it.
You will never reach that optimal sustainable governance without automation.
Yeah. So the tools today are absolutely essential. So what these folks are offering here is going to be a make or break deal in any data governance project that you are running, right? Let's talk a little bit about what that automation looks like. I think Gaurav, you mentioned AI and ML. So can you give some examples of how this actually works inside a data governance project? Some concrete examples?
Sure. In a data governance project, there are multiple different phases in which automation comes into play. Number one, when we start with metadata, we identify what are the key parts of the data estate that are important to this organization. And while looking at it, it's good to look at the past. We have these modeling tools and mainframes and statistical tools that are important, but also what users are going to do in the future as well. I looked at your poll about what are you governing today, and I looked at AI models standing at 11%, and that's at 11% today. With more and more users building AI models and data science notebooks and tools, data science tools of their choices, it will be important to understand, whether the data that was used in those AI models, was that okay? Did that have any biases? It will be important to take data governance to the new world and where new users are going as well. So automation is about making sure that we look at those data science notebooks and automatically extract what data sets were used, what lineage was there, what preparation steps were getting used. Otherwise, as I said, we'll go back to the Excels of the world and we'll start writing those steps and documenting that lineage. Now, taking one more step ahead, in the data governance projects, there are other things that we do. We do classify data assets, we categorize them, we say that this particular data assets are sensitive, this is used in this department and all of that. There are a lot of classification activities, a lot of context association activities that get done. And that is the most tedious part of any governance project. It takes months and months, army of people to do this association by hand. I'll give an example. We had this customer that we were working with, and there was this user, healthcare organization, large enterprise, and they had this data warehouse, one schema, and they were trying to associate the business glossary and data dictionary terms that they had written to the technical assets by hand. And it took that particular user, one user, sitting for 2.5 months, trying to associate these technical data assets with business glossary terms, about 21,000 columns, and doing these associations by hand. When AI came into play, that time just compressed from 2.5 months to 8 minutes. And the accuracy was very close to humans. So we are doing a lot of good stuff with AI. AI can now write code. AI can generate images from natural language. I think it's time now to bring AI into data governance and making the lives of our users easier as well.
Well said.
Maybe a subtle counterpoint, but I think automation, and I agree 100%, right? I think, Josh, you mentioned it, data governance without automation is just not a reality anymore. I think that what we're seeing customers come back to us and say, and what we would advocate for as well, is that automation is going to answer a lot of questions that are manually being answered today, right? Describing an asset inventory, looking at an entire data estate and aggregating what exists, what kind of metadata do we hold, how are we tagging it, right? Those associations can be run out effectively. But a lot of customers are saying that they don't maintain a level of maturity to where automation can answer all of their problems. There has to be, and it's incredibly important as we work with customers, is we all provide technologies that help enable customers down their data governance maturity lifecycle. that we associate the level of human context and knowledge that individuals and data stewards and data curators bring to the organizations that we support. And we let automation stop just short of where they maintain a level of specialization, and let those two work in conjunction with each other well, until that point where AI and NLP can start to take over the lift of human responsibility as it relates to data management, associating context to data, and then running out workflows in a programmatic approach.
The one thing I would add to that, Matt, is really, I fully agree. I think that the one thing that we see a lot is, I know we've talked a lot about augmentation and AI in the ecosystem, right? But the reality is that in most organizations, it gets you 50, 60, 70% of the way. And if you think about why that is the case, we're all data practitioners, right? Every machine learning algorithm is as good as the training data that goes into the machine learning algorithm. And the reality is that every data team is unique, right? Every industry is unique, every company is unique. That diversity and uniqueness is not going away. And so one element of that is definitely how do you marry the machine with the human and bring that back into human context workflows. But I think another element of it is also how do you create extensibility to black box algorithms, right? So to give you an example, we actually had a customer, there's an automated PII detection bot that we have out of the box, right? But we had a customer who actually is in a country, developing world country, they have a unique identifier, which a global PII algorithm does not recommend. And so what they were able to do was actually build a classifier for that, put it up in the orchestration layer and auto-classify that, right? And so automation is not just about AI. Automation is also about extensibility. If you're able to leverage the same ability, open up the black box algorithms, Elon Musk seems to think it's a great idea, right? But open up the black box algorithms and allow end users to actually create and take us from 60% to hopefully 90, 95%. And then humans will fill up the last 5%, right? Like that's the way I think we really get to reducing the burden and hopefully, get these programs off the ground as quickly as possible.
So Prakalpa, I think you're talking about flexible automation where you can give the customer the ability to modify the algorithm to suit their needs, and to create a specific type of trigger or alert or classification, right? An open source, like Elon Musk, you beat him to it, right? Open source your algorithms. Is that what you're talking about?
Open up the algorithm for the customer to be able to actually modify, add, today, all our customers have data scientists, right? Like they can write algorithms. We have to create the ability for our products and platforms to actually utilize that and do the kind of classification and get the 100% in some ways.
Interesting.
I think it'll be interesting to see the evolution of roles to support that type of functionality. So kind of the blending of data governance and data engineers together into a specialization that really optimizes, that automation within the data governance platforms to build that data intelligence that can support or drive the value of data, the real value, not the potential value, but the real value of the data across the organization. It's very exciting stuff.
Just to add one quick point, it's also starting with evaluating what's your team's skill set, which we haven't talked about, right? Because that's an important element of having to define or understanding your team skill set, and also using that as a parameters to select whether you want to have a completely a pure play, no code and interface that's really going to implement some of your governance, or you want to have a platform that has all the capabilities, but also provides the extensibility to some of the things we just talked about. And then I think that initial skill set evaluation and really putting them through selecting the right platform for them, because they need to own this as you are going through implementation of a governance platform.
Let me tackle a couple of questions from the audience here, kind of related. One's asking, should a data dictionary reside inside the data catalog or should it be separate? And then another person asks, deploying a rich data governance platform that provides all these catalogs and glossaries and metadata, profile, lineage, quality, workflow, isn't that just integrating multiple tool sets? So I guess the questions are, is integration a good thing or a bad thing when it comes to a data governance platform?
Sorry, I can take the second part of the question first. Spoken a lot about the automation stuff. I think somebody said, must have been Mark Anderson or Ben Horowitz, that all money in the business is made out of unbundling and rebundling, right? And we've seen that in data management, right? Every single part of data management has been unbundled. Data integration now is ingestion and transformation and reverse ETL of all things. Data cataloging also now is getting unbundled to just data lineage, startup, and other governance focused tools and so on. I personally think that if it's all very healthy, if you have that one specific use case today of, I need to get the data lineage part completely done, absolutely, that's the thing that the users should look at. Again, my suggestion would be to look at future requirements and how metadata world is evolving in general. We've been in this space for 20 years, 30 years, and we started with looking at metadata as something that were used to debug integration workflows, and we have come a long way, and we have a long way to go from here. We think of metadata as helping across the data delivery value chain, across all the activities that we do with data management and data consumption. So if you see the world that way as well, think of what will need to be done to use the metadata and metadata intelligence that has been gathered and bring that to your data management tools and to your data consumption tools, because that's manual work that you'll have to do later in the future.
Yeah, if I may chime in here. So going back to your two questions, the first one is, should the data dictionary be part of your governance? The answer is yes, absolutely yes, right? Because if you start, and personally, some of us at the Data Geek started this discovery exercise and starting to capture this information in a spreadsheet, and then very quickly it gets obsolete. So from a governance tool standpoint, what's called a data dictionary is nothing but a business glossary in your governance tool. And that should really provide your relationship, a nice structure, definitions, both technical and business definitions. So, and it's automatically gets refreshed as things changes behind the scene, right? So that's, we feel that that's absolutely a must-have from a governance standpoint. The second one, to Gaurav, just to augment a few things that Gaurav mentioned, what we are seeing is, the integration. Most customers, they really don't. They bring governance halfway through or towards the end of their overall data analytics initiative. Ideally, it should have done in the very beginning, just by your, the framework we talked about in the beginning of the call, but that just reality doesn't happen. Now, how do you bring the platform that's already, some of the implementation of other vendors are already underway. So having the right level of integration by different mechanics, whether it's an API, whether it's whatever the, driver based, is extremely important, so that you're not duplicating the work or the investment that's been done by your customer, but rather integrating and bringing in those technical sort of metadata into the governance platform and augmenting everything else what the platform is supposed to do.
So I think what I'm hearing, Ashwin, is that inside your platform, you should have a rich set of capabilities that are completely integrated. So data dictionary and a catalog that are tightly integrated, for one. Lineage integrated. You wouldn't want to go out. I don't think anyone on this panel would say that you should go, if you have data lineage and that's your big need, that you should go out and buy a pure play product necessarily, because ultimately you're going to need all the other components. So
yes,
an integrated platform, but at the same time, that platform, even though it has all these capabilities, can never be the be all and end all of a data governance initiative. And it has to be open through APIs to whatever else exists in the organization, so it can import and export metadata. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct. It should be the bi-directional integration, not just one way.
Okay, great. I wanted to touch on something else that John first raised, and then it came up a little bit in this panel, I think when Matt was talking, which was the need to balance control and empowerment, right? These are the twin, I think, goals of data governance. Initially, it was to control data security, data prevent breaches, right? And then with regulations to manage privacy and GDPR and all that good stuff. But if done right, data governance, and I think Prakapa, you said this, also should be empowering, right? It should give access to people to data they may not have known existed before. But this is really hard to do, to balance these things, because they're polar opposites. So what recommendations would you give to people when they're thinking about their data governance program, how to balance these twin opposites, really?
Let's start in a simple use case. Most organizations, like complex that we work with, like top 2 banking customers, right? They come up with this conversation with a governance policies, data security policies, and all that. So control in that context is really when the corporate IT and InfoSec is providing those policies for governance team to embrace. Now, when those policies are implemented within the right tool, then that really has become more of a policy sort of principles, and that's implemented within this governance context in the platform. And those policies have enough, sort of the way it is implemented, we have seen has enough, a right way to configure in such a way that any data that's touching that policies is automatically taking care of, making sure that the overall data flow from source to destination or left to right, those policies are implemented and is captured the right sort of result and metrics to measure. So if you look at the control is from what the governance team, or I would say data security team, is providing. But when you are implementing that, really empowering implementation of those policies in the tool in such a way that your data pipeline and governance pipelines are inferring those policies and providing the right level of output, such as a report or metrics, and so that you're measuring whether these policies are implemented in a correct context or not. I think that's the empowerment it comes, right? Where your data citizens or consumers of the data, they really don't need to understand the complexity of data privacy rules. But what they need to know is, can I configure my data quality score, right? And accepting, let's say it was set to 90, but I'm reducing the threshold to 80%. Can I do that? If I do that, what is the impact? I think having that flexibility and empowerment is very, very important. And then as you are implementing through the data access policies and your data quality policies, and you kind of go through that level of empowerment is what we're calling that as an important element for some of the most powerful governance tools.
Yeah, I think if you boil this down and you think about any governance project through the lens that we've all looked at governance projects and other IT projects, it's people, process, and technology, right? All of us on the panel would think that our technology is going to provide a unique benefit to the organizations that we support. And I'm sure we all have a stake to claim in that fight. But I think if you don't understand how you can iterate on the specific policies and on the change management component with your people, and you approach an effective data management program, because you don't want to drive at full speed and have your foot on the brakes at the same time. So you don't want to slow things down in the light of better governance, because then your governance teams, your privacy and security teams are looked at as a blocker and a bottleneck. And you're not enabling people to go through the right processes and procedures to effectively run out a program. So if you can look at it from a top down and bottom up, and you give people small wins along the way, you allow certain business functions to run out, you associate a level of risk against what you think is happening, and then you start to enable the right OCM components of adopting new policies and procedures, having better training, giving people the right sort of access at the right time. You're going to get a better long-term return because you've enabled the people in the right places. I think an understated part of that is identifying data stewards and curators and just advocates for better governance across your business. Don't just think about data governance as a siloed implementation of technology and we're now the gatekeepers on information. You have to democratize and socialize that level of responsibility so that you can effectively change the way individuals look at information. Otherwise, you can have the best technology in the world, but if it's not adopted broadly and change management incorporated, it's a shelf life purchase.
I love that response. And we often talk about the concept of governance by design. And really, that's what we're striving for, is integrating all of that governance rigor into the day-to-day development process, the delivery of those data pipelines and analytical solutions. So it's not seen as extra work. It's just the way we do business. We're not doing it to prevent people from being agile. We're doing it to help them avoid pitfalls and make them faster, because they're not falling in these holes and having to climb out.
I agree. And one of the things that we hear from our IT friends all the time is that nobody's high-fiving them in the halls saying, great work, you gave us access to the data we needed yesterday, and so on. And every time the complaints are about, we waited for a very long time, and then took a long time before we got access to the data that we wanted. And all of it is very important. The things that keep the governance people and IT people up at night is getting sensitive data out in the open and to everyone. No data analyst wants that, no IT user wants that as well. So the control versus empowerment discussion is a very important one, and we think of all of it as empowerment. We think that we should think of this in the pharmacy model, so to speak, that if we put everything in control, then it'd be very difficult to even get headache medicine and paracetamols and allergy medicines and so on. There are data sets that are that should be public, that should be made available to everyone. There are data sets that have policies applied to it and should be more controlled. And again, that's where automation comes in, automatically classifying these two data sets, making it easier for end users to be able to get access to both kinds of data sets.
To round it off, I think the one interesting way to think about this, I think, is like, as you think about technology, is to actually see parallels and analogs to society. So something I think a lot about is actually just how politics and governance in politics has evolved over time, right? So we used to start out with actually autocracies, right? So, lots of kings, purely top-down kind of ecosystem. From there, we actually moved, like in the Renaissance era, we moved to purely bottom-up, right? And that didn't work. It actually resulted in anarchy, right? And now if you think about where we've settled in right now, we've settled in democracy, which is really like a great mix of bottom up and top down. And that's really what community is about. That's what society is about, right? And so as we think about our data communities inside the organization, how do we actually bring in those same elements? And it has to be a mix of both. That's when, like, we talk a lot about data democracy, data community, but like I think a lot of lessons we can actually take from how society itself has evolved and take that back into our organizations.
Okay, so that's great. I want to pivot a little bit as we're nearing the end here. All of you are sitting on cutting edge platforms, and you're researching the next generation of these tools and products. The space is moving very fast. Where do you think data governance will be in the next 1 to 3 years? Can you give our audience a little bit of a crystal ball? And 3 years from now, if we got back together, what would these platforms look like?
I can go first. I think governance will become a use case for a lot of amazing things that metadata can drive in the organizations, right? And I think we've all been hinting towards it in some ways today. But the way I think about it is you have essentially a central, I think we've still just scratched the surface of what metadata can do. We use some use cases, discovery, catalog, governance. But if you really think about what the future of metadata can do, right? You should be able to say 90% of my users log into my BI tool at 10 a.m. on Monday morning. I use that to auto scale up my compute engines in Snowflake, and I update my pipeline 15 minutes before. And then when users log out, I auto scale down everything. Tons of use cases, right? Being able to automatically purge your data assets, cost control, being able to understand, automatically actually scale up, scale down, understand where you're spending costs, the true intelligent data management platform dream in some ways. There's a lot you can do with it, right? And so the way I think about it is, all our metadata in one place, intelligent, making it usable. That's where a lot of this automation, bots, all of those frameworks come in. But then you take that back to activate it, and activate it by bringing it back into human workflows in whichever kind of human workflow. Governance is one of them, discovery is another, the way people use Slack is a third, right? So bring it back into that, and then bring it back into machine-led workflows itself, right? Which can hopefully truly help us solve the bundling versus unbundling debate for once and for all. So, because the answer should be, it shouldn't matter. Bundle or unbundle, we still have the same ability that metadata can drive.
Yeah, I think the next 1 to 3 years, there's going to be a lot of lift that has to happen for the right policies, procedures to be incorporated across how data is managed right now, because the nuances of international regulatory landscape are incredibly vast. So how do organizations start to identify and parse through what those different obligations look like and identify their own strictest standard for their data management efforts? I think that mission statement or sentence in and of itself could keep lawyers and technologists in bundles, or to use that term again, but that could keep them in fits for the next 18 months. I think you said it beautifully. Almost like data governance is going to be defined as a new category over the next 1 to 3 years by looking at the art of the possible, right? How do you take metadata information that a healthcare organization maintains and come up with a propensity to pay model on how they advocate for certain procedures to individuals in their networks? How do you take banking institutions and lenders and you debunk this notion of coded bias and effectively put the right controls in place and unlock data to where they can make better fiduciary decisions for the individuals that they support? So I think the art of the possible is probably the best way to define the next 3 to 5 years. And likely when we get together again, Wayne, in 5 years and we're doing all this in person, we'll be singing a very different tune about the role that data governance played in this next notion of trust and transparency as it relates to true data intelligence across organizations.
Well said.
And I agree with that, both the comments as well as just to add a couple of additional points. What we are also seeing a convergence, right, in terms of catalog, metadata, governance. And these were used to be really separate tools, but this convergence of all the three, I think is going to be very, very important, because in order to answer a business question about the trust or for your governance or your security, you have to have this convergence happening in a more of a single pane of glass, so that you can bring all this information in that pane, that view, and answer those questions. Whether it is what's your trust score, what is the impact of this particular data set downstream, or what is your overall the policies, what data sets it's touching. So however it is being measured, I think this convergence is just likely to happen. The second one is sort of from a data management standpoint, industry is very familiar with the big data, but I think metadata, even though it is metadata, sort of the volume of metadata tend to be small, but when you are working with the customers that are like top one, the banking clients, in that context, your governance platform, even the metadata across all the things that you are capturing could be a pretty big, big size, and it could be a big data as well. So the scale that it has to operate by no means should be any less than any other enterprise product or the platform that's out there. So that's just the scalability aspect of the governance would be extremely important. And in the last one, I may just add is, we've been seeing the governance is a kind of, in some cases, as a poster child to pick up a platform and integrate within the organization. And that's where a lot of things kind of fail. And going back to Sean and Josh's comment earlier, it has to be part of the day-to-day work. But what we are in context to measuring that, right? If you look into the overall data analytics initiative, your data discovery, a lot of organizations tend to spend about 30% of the time, and your governance platform solves that data discovery pretty efficiently. So bringing that in the front, in the beginning of the data analytics initiative will likely to happen, because that's where the value it's going to bring and the problem it is going to solve.
So I have a follow-up question to that. So we have an ongoing theme of the criticality of metadata to all of this, and even going beyond data governance to, and empowering the business. Do you foresee metadata governance becoming a function of your data governance platforms?
Absolutely. I think there are a couple of things. So capturing the metadata, as well as syndicating the metadata into the other tools. And then that has to happen in context of the integration we talked about earlier, but also the governance of the metadata in terms of what to change, what are the things that's going to be fed into the downstream, that which will trigger certain policies or access. Those things are going to be eventually going to be part of the governance.
It'll be very similar to master
Yes.
data management, but
Yes.
a domain of metadata. So I think organizations are going to start investing more in metadata strategies, or else they'll end up in a situation where they have lots of metadata, but nobody trusts it. We'll have metadata quality programs, metadata management, all of that. So it's a whole other realm of governance that we haven't really focused on yet.
Absolutely, Sean. In fact, we're coming the full circle on metadata management that way now, right? And then this will be metadata graph management, being able to look at all the metadata and its relationships across the organization, and making sure that that's the golden source of metadata for that organization. So all of the things that come with master data management. I think 3 more things I would add as to where we go in 1 to 3 years. I talked about in context. I think users will demand that this data intelligence is available where my users are. So I'm looking at a report, I should be able to trust that data. I should be able to see the lineage, the business context, everything around it within context. Second, I think the world is getting more decentralized, so more federal governance of data where the data is. So those kinds of frameworks will come into play. And third, we talked about automation quite a lot. I think we are going into a world where humans in the middle, humans will manage the work of bots that are doing governance for us. We need to be ready for a world where changes in regulatory policies will automatically allow the bots to read the policy, try to understand what data sets will be affected by it, auto tag that, so that this kind of work does not need to be done by humans by hand. I think those are the 3 major changes that are coming our way very fast.
Interesting. So you're telling, just going back a little bit, you're telling users that they not only have to manage their big data, they're going to soon have to manage all their big metadata too, right? All right, so one last question. This is our speed round, okay? So we want each of you to talk about the one thing that is most unique about your product. If you could keep it to like 30 seconds, that would be awesome. So what is the one thing that's most unique about your product that the audience should know about? And this will be a good segue to our breakout rooms where they can come and ask you more questions about your product or things you talked about or anything that Sean and Josh or Dave talked about today. So who wants to start?
Okay, so I think from Zaloni's standpoint, for us, what we are really proud of is when we think about catalog, it is really about cataloging of your structured data, unstructured data, and assets, digital assets. Because if you think about an organization building an end-to-end data analytics project, you need not only the data set, but also where the code is, how many developers are developing the code, what are the data scientists building the analytics reports and models. So for bringing the catalog in context to the data and digital assets, including reports, machine learning models, as well as even the project plan, so that it can be available in one view and any governance, the team can search on it saying, what is the status of this project? Who are all the people accessing it? What code they're accessing it? Which code is being used to bring what data set? And what is the lineage of that data journey? I think we feel that's very unique for Zaloni.
That's very cool to index not just the structured data that we think of, but all data, even project plans. That's cool. Okay, go ahead, Gaurav.
From Informatica standpoint, I think if I have to say one thing, I'll talk about future ready, which is too many words and describes a lot of things, but I'll say the key things that we discussed about the coverage of the data estate to get data lineage from the most complex systems, either of yesterday or of tomorrow, automatically, and then making sure that we are helping users stay ahead of the scale of data that's coming their way. That's the main things that we do. Our investments go in the area of AI. We call it the Claire AI engine that works on looking at all the data that we have and then try to drive intelligence for it, for data governance and other capabilities as well. And finally, the platform, the Informatica Data Management Cloud provides an integrated solution of capabilities where the metadata that we capture in the catalog and governance solution does not just stay in the catalog and governance solution. That's used for empowering the data engineers and integration, where we suggest automation that can be done, recommendations for joining data sets, etc. In data quality, in master data management, all of the data management layer. So that's what Informatica gives you, truly integrated intelligent data management cloud with very comprehensive data cataloging and governance capabilities.
Excellent.
I can go next. Action's built on we're the only metadata orchestration platform that exists today in the ecosystem. So fundamentally, we are built on what we call a metadata orchestration layer. The way I think about that is metadata in, metadata processing, and most importantly, metadata activation to take it back into your day-to-day workflows. What that means is being able to take back metadata into communication tools, collaboration tools, BI tools, and make it available as a part of day-to-day workflows. And take those day-to-day workflows and contribute back to your data governance programs, right? So when someone is in Slack and they're having a conversation, that's actually context that can come back into your central governance program in some ways. And so one is like, how do you make governance part of the day-to-day work? It should not be a new category of work that anyone needs to do. It should just feel like it's a part of your daily work. And the second is being able to actually enable tools to work better together. The way I think about this ecosystem is there's a diversity of people and there's a diversity of tools. We achieve perfect peace, zen from the chaos, if we are able to help the tools and the people work better together, right? And so enabling, again, the governance to enable those tools to work better together, again, through these automation workflows and metadata orchestration platforms. So that's really where I would say our biggest differentiator is.
Okay, Matt, you have the last word.
Oh, no pressure. So I think the biggest place that our organization sees the next 3 to 5 years is around operationalizing trust. So effectively, the way the OneTrust platform works and where we feel like we have a unique place in the market is that not only can we discover at scale across structured and unstructured sources the different specific elements that exist inside of your data estate, but we can effectively then marry that element level information against the regulatory context, the privacy context, security controls that govern your business's data, and socialize it in a way that that metadata can effectively be actioned. How do we build in risk and remediation plans along the way in order to effectively encompass how the organizations that we support want to facilitate better data management? From that, we've effectively then unlocked data. We've put it through the right trust framework. We've had the weigh in from privacy, security, risk, third-party due diligence on how that data was acquired, the purpose it was acquired for, and we can now run out what we can effectively utilize that data for to help innovate within our business. So we see this notion of operationalizing trust as being the next big fulcrum for change, not only societally, but in terms of how technology is utilized across, enterprise organizations. And so we want to stay at that center of enabling trust in organizations as it relates to data management and data intelligence.
Excellent. We got about 1 minute. Sean, Josh, do you have any last words? Not to put you on the spot or anything, but I am.
No, ultimately, I'm very excited to see how things have evolved over the last few years and where they're going, and hear what you're saying today. So it's going to make all of our jobs a lot easier. We just need to make sure we pick the right tools for the right purpose, or the right platform for the right environment, and everybody will be happy.
Yeah, I'll have to say, having done a little analysis on each of these products, they're all very unique. It's not like we have a homogeneous market with homogeneous products. So it shouldn't be too hard to find the one that's right for your organization. And they're all very cutting edge, using metadata in really interesting, innovative ways. So with that, I would like to, again, share my screen, but also more importantly, thank you for participating on this panel. Gaurav Pathak from Informatica, Prakalpa Sankar from Atlan, Ashwin Nayak from Zaloni, and Matt
Thank you.
from OneTrust. Thank you. So now we're going to pivot to our breakout rooms. We have about 45 minutes for these. These are the companies that have breakout rooms, the 4 companies you've heard from on the panel, plus Atacama and Infovia. Atacama is an all-in-one data management governance tool, and Infovia focuses exclusively on data access governance. So you can find the links to these breakout rooms in the chat window. I encourage you to visit one or many of these, find out a little bit more about these companies, their products, ask their folks questions. And then at 2:15, we'll come back here and summarize the event and send you on your way. So with that, I'll send you off to the breakout rooms for 45 minutes or so. And if you want to stay in those longer, that's fine too. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in 45 minutes. Okay, let's start the last part of our virtual event, and we'll wrap up this CDO TechVent. So Sean, Josh, and I are going to talk about key takeaways. If you're still in a breakout room, that's great. Continue your conversation, but you might want to close down the Zoom link. So I'll just put out some key takeaways that I have from the event, and then Sean, Josh, maybe you guys could chime in, come off mute. So I'm definitely seeing, this is colored by the research that we did prior to the event, that the products in this space are proliferating, which is exciting, a lot of new innovation. And they're also converging in functionality, especially the data management tools are adopting data governance capabilities quite quickly. So as I said earlier, it's important to evaluate these tools and make sure they fit your requirements. Hopefully we helped you narrow down the number of tools that you need to evaluate to some degree with our product frameworks. Now, the changing regulations and policies also has a play here. We mentioned that automation is key with these tools. You can't do data governance without the automation that they afford, but you can't also do them, keep up with changing regulations and policies without these tools as well as the ever-growing volume of data. So the tools are very important. And the tools can start to embed your knowledge of data governance and your processes so that when employees do leave, you're not high and dry. So the tools can help onboard new employees, document and surface the rules and processes for how you do data governance. So Josh, Sean, any key takeaways from your end?
I think the main one for me is how important metadata is becoming beyond how important it already was. So I think we're just seeing a trend where metadata is going to be utilized more broadly, used to support automation. And, we already know metadata is critical for things like data literacy and privacy and security. So I think that trend is just going to evolve. And along with that, there'll be new roles for managing that metadata, and more organizations putting time into a metadata strategy.
Right. So next time we'll be talking about metadata swamps, right?
I get involved in a lot of business transformations, a digital transformation or a data transformation, and it's a really easy sell. So it just makes sense to embed data governance and metadata in your change program. It might seem overwhelming to think that you have to inventory all of your legacy systems, and it just seems like too much work and not enough value when we're about to change everything. I think it's really important that people see the value can be organic and grow. So when your big change program is done, you have that catalog of catalogs, you have that data intelligence available to all of your users. And that really helps your digital transformation go from we're done to we've optimized and we've optimized and we've optimized, because we now have so much data and it's so easy to find.
The one term I kept hearing, and I remember Matt said this quite a few times, was the data estate. Is that a term that you guys use?
Not necessarily data estate, but ecosystem is, a common term to kind of what is the entire, landscape of systems and data within the organization. And you can extend that to external sources where you're integrating and pulling information in as well. So I believe that's what he was referring to with data estate.
Yeah, I kind of like that term. And we did have some questions about to what extent do data governance tools cover the data estate? There was questions about unstructured data and real-time data and AI models. And then Ashwin from Zaloni mentioned, project plans even.
Yep.
And any data asset is fair game, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's either data or metadata, right? So it really shows how important it is to nail down your scope at the beginning. So yes, you could govern all of that, but you probably don't have the capabilities to do that. So start small and expand, and that needs to be linked back to your strategy. But when you are rolling out new solutions, new analytical products and things like that, if you can embed those governance concepts in there, then you don't have to go back and retrofit it later. So the priority should be, on the new stuff being built, and then go back and look at the risks of some of your existing stuff to see if you need to retrofit some governance features in there.
Yeah, that kind of gets at that governance by design, which is an interesting phrase. And I know both you guys use that a lot. And I think you think it's the key really to doing this right. So no matter what your scope is, whether it's a project or it's a domain or the enterprise, you really want to focus on embedding governance into core processes of that scope, right? So when you're building something or deploying something.
And similar to quality by design or privacy by design, these are just concepts of not having things done as an afterthought, doing it as early as possible in your design process. And then it's fully integrated into the solution as opposed to being an add-on later. So it just gives.
Can you give an example of that from one of your clients?
Well, a good example is, if you're doing a predictive model to help understand customer retention or employee retention, even better. So starting at the beginning and looking at, we get back to the risk piece. So what are all of the risks associated with this, data quality, the usage of that data? Are we straddling that ethical line between appropriate use of information and breaching somebody's privacy? And who has the authority to make that decision as to whether we've stepped over that line or not, based on what we're doing with that predictive model? How is that model being used to make decisions that affect employees or customers? And then what are the ways that the outcomes from that model could be undermined through data quality or somebody not doing their job properly, things like that, and then putting controls in place to mitigate those risks. And that's where stewardship comes in, auditing processes. So identifying what we need to do to really manage the quality of that product. So it's not managing compliance risk and all of that. It's also managing the overall quality, which drives the outcomes.
We had a question about ROI, and I'm wondering if you guys track or think it's even possible to calculate ROI of data governance projects.
I'll say, because I've lived in the world of metrics with working with finance teams, anything is possible, but I don't think you'd get alignment on all the VPs on your measurement approach. The ROI of data governance, really, I'll say it over and over again, to protect the company, its customers and employees. You could add partners and stakeholders as well, but I really see data governance as a governing function that is essential to running a business that is data focused. And I will compare it to the project management office or the legal and compliance team or finance or the risk team. I've never heard anyone ask me the question, what's the ROI in finance? Like, why do we need these guys? No, you need it to run the business.
Yeah.
That is one of the mind shifts that I think Sean and I try to help with. And there's different ways to do it, really. And I think part of it talks to one of our first slides today on the difference between data governance and data management, and starting with that education and building up that knowledge.
There is an aspect of data governance where you could incorporate some ROI. So if you're looking at it from a more of a proactive or an enablement perspective. So if your governance resources identify an opportunity to standardize certain data because they know down the road that we want to do some, machine learning or other initiatives that are dependent on that data, then you could have ROI calculations assigned to those initiatives. But when it comes to compliance and some of the other things, it comes back to the reputation of your organization and how important is that to you.
Yeah.
You can actually use risk monitoring or risk tolerance approaches to help with the metric. So if we say data governance is here to protect the data, well, what happens if we lose one record or all of our records? What is the value? What is the impact to that of the organization based on the industry we're in and how much data we have? And it really, that protection metric is easy to get to. an operational metric on performance or a, how much money are we making? Yeah, we're not making money with data governance.
Right. Well, that makes sense. It's possible to calculate the risk, right? So that might be the way to go. Any other key takeaways, guys?
Yeah, I think that, everything's changing fast, but the more clarity you have around what the priorities are for your organization, what strategic initiatives you have coming up over the next 5 years. If you have a data strategy, understanding the nuances of that, and then relating that to the platforms you need to support data governance, so data governance can support that data strategy.
What about on the tools? Do you think our frameworks are going to help people select the right product? We did have one question in there. It's like, well, all those quadrants that you presented, they all apply. So
I'd say it'll be obvious in the coming few years which companies are using tools and finding the efficiencies that come with data governance and proper data management. They're going to simply perform better. They're going to get insights sooner. They're going to get better information to make decisions, and they're going to drive their companies to more success. I think these data governance platforms are a key to that success. If you're just using Excel, or if you're trying to use an Access database to run your metadata, it's just not going to work. Yeah. It's not going to give you the kind of value that you need.
Yeah. And then even if you do have a data catalog tool and a glossary tool, it really doesn't always give you everything you need. You need those workflows, you need that portal, there's a lot of features you need, and you could use other tools to provide that functionality, but then from an experience perspective for consumers of that information, it gets a little awkward. So we need to manage that experience for data owners, data stewards, and consumers of that metadata to make it as possible.
These tools are really powerful. I don't think most organizations know how to get the most value out of them yet. It's going to take a while before they really mine the depths of what they offer. And at the same time, these products are in a race really to add complementary functionality to support the end-to-end governance process. And whatever domain, on whatever system and platform, integrating with whatever existing tools that you have. So they've got a big roadmap ahead of them, but I'm really surprised how fast these guys can move. All the products that we had in the event today are just very dynamic, in many cases adding things very quickly to their product line. So it's a brave new world out there for data governance than it was even a year ago. So
yeah, and I guess one watch out is, with the breadth of functionality that these platforms have, you need to make sure you have the resource capability, or you have the ability to assign resources to be the administrators of those platforms and oversee them, or else they're not going to provide the value that you want.
Right. And with that, I think we've come to our end. Our next event is August 18th on data observability. And then we'll be doing 3 of these a year going forward. So thank you, everyone. If you're still there, if you're not, or you're listening to the recording, we hope you much success in all your data governance endeavors. So thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.